This video is about product inspections for Amazon sellers, and our guest is Sajag from Movley company, which is helping to inspect products for e-commerce sellers. And in this session, you will learn why inspection service is important and what could be the cost if you decide to ignore inspection. And also Sajag, our guest, will give you tips how to deal with manufacturers which are a little bit resistant in allowing inspectors in their factories. And finally, you will get an idea how inspection services work and how to work with them as an Amazon seller. The host of this video is Lisette Lis. She works with different Amazon brands. And finally, I would like to remind you to subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell as well. And here we talk with different Amazon experts, service providers, software creators, and event organizers.
Hello, Sajag. It's great to have you here today to talk about inspection, which is definitely a topic you're super passionate in. So before we go into the discussion, could you please introduce yourself to our viewers and tell us what do you do in the Amazon space?
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Lisette, for having me on. I'm really excited to be on. So my name is Sajag. I'm the CEO and founder of Movley. Movley does quality control inspections, specifically tailored to Amazon sellers, although we also work with Brick Mortar and other sellers. I actually previously used to be an Amazon seller, and it was my personal experience with manufacturing and doing inspections that actually led me to founding Movley. So about 5 years ago, I founded my first e-commerce brand. Actually, that's a lie. I've been doing e-commerce for almost a decade now. I founded my first private label Amazon brand about 5 years ago. And that brand booted up, and we grew really fast. So our first year we did about 40K in revenue. Our second year we did about $1 million. And our third year we were on track to do about $2 million a year. We just started having a lot of quality control problems and things like that. So I ended up moving to China back in 2017 for 6 months. And living there and actually learning about the supply chain, building an office there, and being on the ground and visiting factories every single day. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit brief history.
So as a starter, could you explain what are the things you would like to focus on during today's interview where we will talk about inspections?
So yeah, one of the biggest things I want to focus on is actually what is the true cost of a bad product batch? And what is the distinction between Amazon and brick and mortar? Because there's a huge difference. So level 2 is kind of the normal for brick and mortar, but we'll get into that. So what's the difference between brick and mortar and Amazon? So just in a general sense, think about the last $20 or $30 item you bought from Walmart, and that broke. You probably think about the last product you bought from Amazon that broke. Now the Walmart product, you probably just threw it away, and you probably didn't go back to the store to return it. But with the Amazon product, you probably, you're one click away from getting a return. You don't even have to leave the house. You're one click away from, filing for a warranty claim. You're one click away from leaving a negative review for the product. And if you leave a lot of negative reviews, the product has to be sometimes re-ranked and relaunched on a brand new listing, which is really expensive. That's something that we had to do also when we were running our Amazon business. So in a general sense, on a statistical level, 30% of products in e-commerce are returned versus about 8.9% in stores. And my bet is that it's probably even higher on Amazon because it's just so easy to return products versus buying it from like Shopify or Sears.com if they still exist. But, that's why effective inspections for Amazon sellers are way more important. So a lot of people in the industry, if you're familiar with AQLs and things like that, and I believe we're doing another video on that, which goes into a little bit more technicals and what those levels look like. But in a general sense, a lot of sellers say, hey, level 2 is kind of the normal inspection level. And that's kind of the normal for brick and mortar brands. But level 3, doing a little bit more thorough inspection is very important, and making sure that's effective is really key if you want to make sure your products are built properly. Because without that effective inspection, you're going to have a lot higher chance of returns and problems in your e-commerce store than you are going to be in brick and mortar. So don't use brick and mortar standards to determine your supply chain for e-commerce. That's kind of my motive there. But in terms of one bad product badge, I just want to walk the viewers of this video, I want to walk you guys through just a quick case study. Now, this is not a specific product, but there's specific numbers in this case study. So let's say we have one batch of products. It's 1,000 units, and we bought it at about $10 a unit with a 50% defect rate. This could have been order number 4 or 5 in your product. So you have 500 defective units. Some could be on arrival, or some could be after a few months of use, just breaking apart. And remember, quality fade can happen on any order, and gradually happens across all orders. So let's say you have about 200 returns and 300 warranty replacements out of those 500 defective units. So 500 warranty, 300 warranty replacements means they broke apart after a few months of use. So the 200 returns would cost you about $37.50. That's a $5 in lost profit per unit, an FBA fee loss of about $3 per unit and then a $10 unit cost, as well as a return administration fee that Amazon charges, which would be around 75 cents for this product. We're excluding the FBA fee, that's excluded, but additional categories like apparel, they have an additional return fee that can also be assessed. And let's say we have about 350 warranty replacements. So numbers are a little off. So it's actually 300, but I guess we calculated for 350. So a total of 550 defective, so 55% defect rate. But 350 warranty replacements cost about $5,775. And that's calculating at a $7 an hour rate for customer support in the Philippines. So that's about $350, about 30 minutes per customer support case. At a $10 unit cost, it's $3 shipping. That's about $57.75. Negative review damage, lot ranking, lost sales damage, we're not even counting that, which can be really expensive on Amazon. That's a total loss of about $9,525 plus your negative review damage. And the quality control cost for that, if you did an effective inspection, could be $300 to $600 or something like that. A couple cents per unit on that order. Those 1,000 units only cost about, those 550 defective units only cost about $5,550. The actual loss is much greater than that. It's almost 10 grand plus all this negative review, negative brand damage, etc. So there's a lot more expenses that go into the true product cost. And we're not even including shipping costs or freight costs. We're talking that, those $10 a unit includes the packaging, the shipping, the freight, everything. If there's additional freight costs, it can be even higher. So that one bad product batch, and even if this was a 30% defect rate, if we took 30% of this, that's about $3,000. That's still 10 times higher than the cost of at least a one-day inspection that could have prevented all of those issues from happening. So preventative maintenance for inspections, it financially makes sense. That's why people do it, and that's why big companies do it. And it's also extremely important to protect your brand, your customer reviews, and your ranking, and essentially your customer experience on your Amazon store to keep them buying back from you.
You said you're an Amazon seller yourself. So did you use inspection during your first order for your Amazon store?
Yes, we did use inspections. We used inspections every single order. Despite using inspections every order, we got a lot of past inspections for bad batches. And that was partly due to us, and that was partly due to our inspections company. So there's kind of two sides to the equation. We did use inspections.
Okay, so I think what's the first most important thing to talk about when we talk about inspection? I think you can say that to us and we can continue from there.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that the most important thing when it comes to inspections, a lot of people have the misconception that inspections are a one-time thing or only need to be done every couple of orders. So I think it's really important to talk about the importance of inspections and when to do inspections. So there's two main types of inspections that I like to talk about. The first one is a pre-shipment inspection. That's the one everybody has heard of. That's done at 100% of production completion. All the products are ready to go, ready to leave the factory. It's all about just checking the products, making sure it's good, and then sending it off from that point onwards. There's another type of inspection that's not talked about very often. That's called the during production inspection. And that's actually done during production while the manufacturing is going on. In terms of inspections, you should be doing a inspection, specifically a pre-shipment inspection every order. And that's actually an industry standard. So any major seller and even Fortune 500 companies, et cetera, everybody in the industry that manufactures in a high volume or even small volumes does a pre-shipment inspection at on every order. And the reason for that is it's preventative maintenance. So it's not uncommon for the first order to be great, the second order to be equally good, and then on your third, fourth, fifth order for the quality to start deteriorating. And what ends up happening is, at one point, maybe like with COVID, somebody switches the raw material input and it changes from a high quality one to a low quality one because, the factory shut down due to a lockdown or whatnot. That can completely ruin your entire product batch. So all of a sudden, instead of having a really smooth coating on your product, for example, you might have a really rough coating, and that can completely impact the customer experience. But those are things that can be caught on a pre-shipment inspection. So it's almost, it's preventative maintenance. That one bad batch that you have that you don't catch with an inspection, that's enough in cost and losses to pay for all of your inspections for sometimes several years. So that's really what the point of it is. It's almost like an insurance, but it's an insurance that works with you to make sure your products are good before the damage is hit. So it's like a preventative insurance, if that makes sense.
Okay. And as you work with Amazon sellers now yourself, what would you say, are most of the Amazon sellers using any type of inspection, or they're rather not using the inspection?
Yeah, so most sellers do use inspections, and most of the sellers that I've spoken to have used inspections or do use them regularly. There are some sellers I've talked to a lot of new sellers that are just starting out, and sometimes it's really common, especially in the first few orders, to not do inspections because they feel that it's a little bit too expensive, or it's, they feel pretty confident with the supplier. And I always tell them that, it's like you have more eggs in your bucket. And obviously I'm coming from a little bit of bias because I run an inspections company, but it's also from personal experience. And a lot of people have that misconception that, it might be too expensive, but if that first product batch is bad, and I talk to people who sometimes take loans out to start their Amazon business, they've taken a $10,000 loan and they put 50% of it into that first PO. If that first PO goes bad, you've lost the whole $5,000 plus a little bit more. So it's a really, really good idea, especially when you're a smaller company and you have all your eggs in one basket, to be doing those inspections to make sure that, hey, my products are good. So you don't lose all the eggs that you have in that one basket, right? If that basket disappears, all your eggs crack. So you definitely want to make sure that basket is solid.
So in your opinion, it's super important to include when sellers are planning their cost for bringing a new product in the market, to also include the cost for inspection. But as we have a lot of sellers who are just starting out, how can they estimate the cost for inspections?
That's a really good question. So in terms of an inspection, an inspector in China earns between $13 to $19 an hour. After benefits and taxes, payroll taxes are considered, et cetera. So if you're doing about an 8-hour inspection, which is kind of the standard minimum, it costs already about $100 to about $150 for the inspector's labor. And that doesn't include meals, accommodations, transport, auditing costs, and a margin for the inspection company to operate within. So when you consider all of those different costs, a really good inspection should be in the range of about $300 to $400. And the lowest you could probably get is maybe like $280 before an inspection quality starts deteriorating. So in a general sense, like for example, at Movley, we charge $302 per man day. So just round it down to, let's say, 300. If you have 1,000 units, that's about 30 cents a unit. If you're producing about 10,000 units, that's about 3 cents a unit for a one-day inspection. So really the amount of time the inspection takes, it depends on how thorough you want the inspection to be, how many units you're testing. But really, even a one-day inspection is better than not doing any inspection at all. So if you're on that first order, you're very tight on budgets, a budget for at least one man-day of inspections, and that's about $300. And if you're doing a lot of units, or you're having a very complex product with a lot of parts, depending on your risk tolerance and your budget on that first order, it might be worthwhile to do a little bit more thorough inspection, like a 2 or 3 day inspection, depending on how many units you're looking to test. So I always like to look at it from the cost perspective of per unit. So if I'm producing 1,000 units, my first units are going to be a little bit more expensive because I'm producing less units. So it'll be maybe 30 cents a unit extra. But when I'm doing more volumes, like 2,000, 5,000, that 30 cents might reduce to 15 cents or 10 cents. It's not going to dramatically reduce because I'll have to test more units to make up for the larger sample size, the larger production batch. But it still means that, the cost is going down as you do more units. So you're getting that scale of volume.
Okay, so we went straight to the cost and pretty much in good details already, but also for the viewers who are not familiar with inspection before, I think we have two topics to cover as well. One of the things is like what inspection is overall, what does it include and what can it include? And the second thing is like how sellers can find the providers for doing the inspection.
That's a great question. So yeah, so we did skip over kind of the fundamentals. So let's jump back. So in terms of an inspection, what is an inspection? Simply put, it's when you hire a company to physically go to your factory. And that's a quick question too. We should also talk about is the differences between an inspection at the factory and at a port or a warehouse. I think that's something that a lot of customers have questions for. But in a general sense, an inspection is when you send an inspector over to your factory after your production is done or during production, whatever it might be. And the inspector actually checks a subset of the units. So say you have 1,000 units, it might randomly sample 100 units, 200 units from all of the production batch. That's what they should be doing, randomly sampling from all of the boxes or a strong number of boxes. And then checking to make sure that the product was built properly and it's built to your specifications of the client, not to the factory specifications, to your specifications. So you always want to look at it from a customer perspective. What does the customer see? Do they see scratches? Do they see, the product not working? When you use the product as it's intended to be used, does the product work accordingly? So that's what an inspector does, is they check that across a wide subset of units to make sure that, hey, your product is built properly, and then they send you a report. So then you can use that report to determine, okay, hey, should I buy this order, or are there problems with this order that the factory needs to fix? And then I need to get re-inspected before I actually purchase this order. So that way, when it gets to your customers, they don't have to catch the defects and the bad products for you. Your inspector does that, for you before it even gets to the customer.
Okay, and it's super important to have good quality products in order not to piss out customers on Amazon, for example, right? But the second question was like, is there like any kind of database with the service providers, or what's the best way to find an inspection company? Because sometimes I know manufacturers are also offering to do inspection by their half. So is it a good choice to go with manufacturer inspector?
Yeah, so I think that also works really well into what I was talking about with the factory and the port. So in terms of manufacturers doing their own inspection, it's a really big misconception a lot of times that manufacturers have their own inspection service, sometimes running within their factory. So manufacturers should be doing inspections on all of their production. That's just what manufacturers do. And in the production line, it's not uncommon. It should be mandatory that your manufacturer does quality control checkpoints in the production line. So say you have 10 steps in the production line, 2 of those steps might be quality control steps. Hey, check all the products thus far, make sure the product was built properly, pull it, test it, make sure it's working. There's no scratches, there's no defects. If there are, send it back through the production line and remake that product or repair it. Otherwise, take it to the next step. So and then after that, as the production goes on, the manufacturer should also be doing random sampling on all of the units, making sure that they work, making sure they function. If there's a little bit more detailed and more thorough test that they do, for example, electronics, in an electronic cable, for example, like a USB cable, they run it through a bend test machine to make sure that it's, holding up to its wear and tear potential. So it's a common production, item where the manufacturer will actually pull 1 or 2 items from the production line and actually plug them into the machine and make sure that the product is built and passes the certification. And if it doesn't, then they have to go check all the production units and make sure that those are fixed, because that means the batch failed. So that's what it's the factory's responsibility to do that. So if a factory ever says that we already do our own inspections, or we don't need to get an inspection for that, that is a red flag, because that means that the factory is not really fully truthful in how they do business. And in a general sense, that factory should be doing inspections anyways, and their inspection is for their production. Your inspection is for your customers. So it's a little bit of a different motive. The factory wants to get the minimum level of quality. It's kind of like game theory. The factory wants to get the minimum level of quality and get the highest margin, the highest profit on their product. You, on the other hand, want to get the highest value and quality and the highest quality you can in that price you pay the supplier. So the supplier has an incentive to pass the products as long as it meets that minimum threshold that they can sell the product. Whereas you want to get the order and you want to have it passed and you want to buy it in the sense that the customer is going to have a good experience with the product. So an inspection that a third-party inspection company does is completely different for the most part than what a factory does in the production line or in the random sample. Of course, there's overlap on the same tests and the same situations oftentimes, but it's a different motive, and therefore it's going to have completely different results. So it's not going to be the same thing. And the other thing also that I really want to highlight is that a lot of customers say, hey, I have my freight forwarding company doing my inspections for me. And that's also a really big misconception on how inspections work. So, we've had customers come to us and ask us, hey, is it better to do an inspection at the port when the products are just about to leave versus doing it at the factory? And I always say, and when I founded Movley as well, we agreed to only do it, at least until we really could be completely unbiased. We only wanted to do it at the factory. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, if you do an inspection at the port, oftentimes you have to already pay your supplier the deposit, the balance. So the 70% payment you pay them after the goods are made, you've already paid that to your supplier to get the goods to the port. And if that's the case, you lost your leverage. So if the products are bad, you've already lost the money, you've lost your leverage. And the manufacturer has you have no leverage over the manufacturer to fix those products. That's a huge problem because in Movley, for example, around 60 to 70% of our inspections fail. So if 70% of, on a statistical level, 70% of inspections are failing and you don't have any leverage over the factory because you've already paid them, they'll just tell you, oh, we're sorry, we'll do it on the next order. And then this order is pretty much trash. So that's a huge, huge problem. A second problem is also that at a port, there's oftentimes not a huge amount of workspace and there's nobody who's really familiar with your product. So generally the only companies that do inspections at the port are inspection companies. They're not really inspection companies, they're freight companies that are doing inspections. And that's a big problem because freight companies are not equipped to properly do inspections. They don't have the machinery. Like the factory, when you're at the factory, you have machinery to test the products out. So that bend test machine that I was talking about for USB cable, for example, that's at the factory. There's not going to be a bend test machine at the port. And in addition to that, if you want to open the products, you need to repackage some of the units. You need some extra packaging materials. The factory can do that and make sure that the products are repackaged properly. No one at the port is able to do that. So you're also paying a premium for an inspector at the port because now they have to open the units, they have to unpack the units. They can't do as thorough of a test because they don't have a factory, the factory labs, machinery, they don't have access to that or factory help. Factories have a whole packaging line, assembly line. Your products are opened in inspection, they just go right back through the line and boom, it's repackaged. But they don't have that kind of line in the port. So you're paying a premium for the inspector to do a less thorough inspection and spend more time opening, repackaging, and putting the units back. And that's when you get units to your customers that, they're half open, they're not stuck, the packaging is slightly damaged, and it looks like an open box product because it is. And that's when you have those issues, is because you did the inspection at the port. And not to mention, the companies that do inspections at the port, they're freight companies and they're not equipped. They don't have the statistical models that like we do, for example, for testing an exact number of units or the least number of units to actually make sure the product is tested properly while still being efficient. And they also are incentivized to pass your order because if your order fails, then they have to send it back to the factory. They're going to have to pay for shipping there. They're going to have to work with you. And then the freight that they booked for your products 1 week down the line, they have to find another shipment now to fill that gap. So it's really easy for them to say, hey, your inspection looks good. Your products look good. And, they'll just pass it off. And that's when you get defective products because they have an incentive to pass your products. Whereas an inspection company, they have an incentive to really fail your products. So it's a completely different incentive.
Okay, you're spreading so much valuable information in such a short period of time. I would like to pause myself the video and go back and listen to you again. I have one red flag question for sure. What to do when manufacturer doesn't want to let in any other inspection company? I think it might happen. Perhaps the seller has already manufactured the product, so it's already in work. And now manufacturer is saying that they don't want to let any other company. What to do in that kind of situation?
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great question. There's two things you can do. So there's things you can do then, and there are also things you want to do on a preventative maintenance side. So I'll kind of talk about both because hopefully people watching this video have not completely placed their orders yet, and we can address a lot of those issues before they happen. So the first thing is if that situation happens, it's extremely important not to send that 70% payment because that's your leverage. So oftentimes at that point, if your factory is presenting you with an ultimatum, which is basically buy the order, not check it, gamble all your money with us, or we're not going to let you inspect it before you buy it. Essentially, you're more likely to be buying bad products. At that point, it might just be a wash. So at that point, I would, if I was presented with that situation, I would give my factory an ultimatum. I would tell them, hey, we want to work with you. We want to work with you long-term. We chose you for this order. We sent you a deposit because we're excited to work with you. But inspections are standard practice, and they really are. Any factory that denies inspections, with whatever reason, the inspector is too strict, we don't like third-party inspectors, whatever, every factory knows in China that inspections are a standard, because they're a standard used by every company, small to large, and in every order. So this is a standard practice that your factory is saying, hey, we don't believe in the standard practice. And that's obviously a red flag. So I would recommend giving your factory an ultimatum at that point and saying, hey, we want to do an inspection, and we're going to do an inspection. And the decision for you is either we will have to cancel the order and we won't be able to work together in the future if we don't let us do an inspection, or if you let us do an inspection, we're sure the products are going to be good. The inspector is just going to come, they're going to check some units, and if everything looks good, we're going to get that shipped. And just telling the factory in that way and saying, hey, we want to work together. We really want to do that. It's obviously an industry standard practice. And, we're counting on, you to produce the products. The inspector is just, for our risk. You can also blame it on other people. You could say, hey, we have an insurance provider. Our insurance provider mandates inspections and a quality control. So if our insurance provider or our investors, whoever, you just deflected. It's like when you go to a dealership and, you're like, oh, my wife or my husband, it's not letting me buy the car, same kind of thing. Like, hey, my investors will not let me buy this order if we don't do an inspection. Something like that can also really help and deflect that blame. And then the factory will say, oh, we understand your situation. Your investors are the one giving you money to buy this order, and you're not doing an inspection. Okay, so I guess we have no choice. So when they understand that the decision is not in your control, that can also be really effective to going and doing an inspection. On a preventative maintenance standpoint, what's really best practices is that when you're actually sending out the PO for the order, it's really recommended that you send over the factory when you're doing the PO and tell them, hey, just as over an email, PO looks good, or, even have it in the PO that, hey, we're going to be doing an inspection. We have the rights to check the products before it's shipped. I mean, that's generally what it is, an inspection. It's the rights to check the product before we're purchasing it. And that's a pretty simple right. You want to be able to see what you buy before you buy it, especially when you're talking about a 5, 10, 20, 50, 100K order. You know what I mean? So having the rights to buy the product and seeing the product, can go on unilaterally. So a lot of customers make the mistake of saying, hey, we were going to do a level 2 inspection, and they're going to put that in the PO. That's a little bit too specific because you're kind of limiting your right to check your products. What if you want to do a level 3, and which you should be doing for Amazon? You should be doing a level 3 inspection. What if you're doing another type of inspection, right? You want to do during production inspection, whatever it might be. You're limiting your right to actually do those inspections by being specific. So don't quote me because I'm not an attorney, but my lawyer once told me that, it's very important in business law, when you're working with business law, and this has also been my personal experience, if you keep your contracts vague, and as long as you're not in a regulated sector like employee versus contractor, but if you keep your contracts vague, it actually does more benefit to the party that has the monetary leverage than if you keep the contracts very specific. Specific contracts help people who don't have the monetary leverage. There are protections, all those clauses you see in a purchase order, those 50 pages of clauses, right? If you have a really long contract, those are protections for the weaker party. They're not protections for the stronger party. The stronger party is whoever has the money and is providing the money in the transaction. So the less terms you have there, the more protection you have there. And that's not always the case, but just in the case of purchase orders, obviously if you're making an investment, then you also want terms, it's all, obviously different. Don't quote me on that, but that's in general sense. The vaguer you keep it, as long as you protect your right, that's good. So keep in there that, we have the right to conduct inspections. We have the right to conduct, audit, checks on the products during production, after production, whatever. We have the rights to see the products and check them and open them before the products are, purchased, right? We have that, we retain that right to check it however we want, whether it's level 2, level 3, we want to do this test, that test, doesn't matter. So expressing that right in the PO will really help settle that and keep the score, and then prevent that factory from saying, hey, you can't do that. You say, no, we agreed to it in our PO. That's the terms and conditions.
Mm-hmm. Very good information to definitely think about and also put in use for the sellers. You mentioned that I think it was 70% of inspections failed that you do. So what to do when inspection fails?
That's a really good question. So yes, 70% of our inspections for first orders fail. So I think in terms of like an average order, I think it's like 60% or something. So it's a little bit higher fail rate on the first orders. But in a general sense, if your inspection fails, what you want to do is you want to, first of all, understand what that failure looks like. So when an inspection company gives you a report that says fail, that doesn't necessarily mean the inspection has failed. So with Movley, for example, we actually, we have an internal threshold, and that threshold can be adapted because you choose the defects, the levels of the defects, things like that. So that's all adjustable. But at the end of the day, it's your product, it's your audience. The inspection company can't tell you whether your inspection fails or passes. So you could get a past report from us or any other inspection company. And when you send it over and when you get it, you might say, hey, I'm not happy with the defects. This defect that they marked as a major defect, I think this is a critical defect. I think, even if we have one of these products in a batch of 100, it's going to create a lot of returns or whatever. So if that's the case, it's up to you. You can fail that inspection report, even though you got a pass from the inspection company. And it's the same thing vice versa. So you could get a fail from the inspection company, and you can say, hey, we just failed it because we had too many units with a lot of minor scratches and it passed the internal threshold. I think the internal scratches are important, but frankly, I don't really care. The factory can fix that on the next order. I'm going to pass this inspection for this order. So you can choose to do that. And it's really up to you at the end of the day, not the inspection company, on whether the report passes or the report fails. So that's what's really critical. So there's not, when the inspection company fails a report, it doesn't mean it's necessarily failed. Now, in terms of, let's say an inspection fails, you're not happy with the inspection results. The inspection definitely failed, whether it passed or failed from the inspector end, it failed on your end. The first thing you want to do is reach out to the factory and say, hey, we did an inspection. We're having these problems. We're facing this problem, this defect, this defect, this defect. The inspection results were not good. We need you to fix these problems. Now, what a good factory should do is they should check all of the units. So they will go take the entire production batch, take it back to the workshop, open up all the units, check all of them themselves, and do their own quality control on 100% of the units, pick out the bad units, repair them, replace them, whatever it might be, and then repackage all the units and prepare it ready to go. Now that will take some time. It could take a few days. It does require factory work. And, it's a really painful process for both you and the factory. So that's where, preventative maintenance is really key, where you can tell the factory, hey, if inspection fails, we're expecting you to fix the problems. And, that's why a lot of factories don't like inspection companies, because when they come out with a failed result, then they have to go back and put all this extra work and spend all this extra time and therefore also money to repair the products. So the clearer you can be about your inspection specifications or your product specifications, that, hey, we want that bend test to pass 10,000 bends, and our inspector is going to check for X, Y, Z, and we're going to check for these things. And you tell that to the factory in advance, they can make sure your products are built properly, so you avoid that delay and you avoid those problems. And then obviously you can add a couple of extra tests and things like that. But as long as, if the factory feels that you've added specifications or you've added a change in the products that led to the failure in the inspection, then they can say, hey, we're not happy with this. We didn't agree to this. We didn't want to do this. So we're not going to fix the products for you. We'll just fix the ones that have, visual defects or whatever, which, obviously they have to take accountability for. So, that's kind of what you want to do to avoid that, is, have that communication with the factory to say, hey, we are doing that. But in general sense, a good factory wants to build a long-term relationship with you. So they'll take all those products to fix it. And then at that point, you want to do what's called a re-inspection. And it's called a re-inspection. It's actually like a term in the inspections industry. And a re-inspection is kind of different from a regular inspection. It's done on the same sample size and ideally a little bit higher if possible. But what's nice about a re-inspection is that there's tighter defect tolerances applied to the product. So instead of 10 minor defects to fail the inspection, it might be 8 or 7. And the reason you want to specify that, hey, this is a re-inspection, is because those tighter defect tolerances will be applied. So it's easier to fail the inspection than to pass it. So unless the factory really went through all the products and fixed the problems, that inspection is most likely going to fail, because you want to make sure the factory didn't just go through the units just enough to take it down to that passing line. So that way the inspection is passed. You want to make sure they really went through and fixed the product. So it's a full new random sampling, and it has to be, even at a lower rate than what you imagine, to take into account that distinction.
Okay, thank you so much for such a great takeaways and such valuable, actually actionable tips to use to prevent any issues with product quality. So if anybody has any questions regarding to inspections, then what's the best way to reach out to you? And once more, what do you do usually to help Amazon sellers as well? Let's go through that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So the best way to get in touch with me would be LinkedIn. You can just search up my name, Sajag Agarwal. I'm sure it'll be in the description. And so LinkedIn is a really good way to get a hold of me. Facebook is okay. I'm not too active there, so but LinkedIn is way better. We also have a Facebook group for Movley. It's called, I think it's called Supply Chain FBA. So that's on Facebook. That's a really awesome group. You should definitely join. We're building that up right now. We're growing it. So it's a little bit in the starting phase, but we're building it up. And really, one of the best ways, if you're looking to get in touch with Movley to do quality control inspections, you can reach out at movley.com. And we do quality control inspections specifically for Amazon sellers. So our process, our approach is completely different from other inspection companies. And it's based on my personal experience with hundreds of other sellers and their experiences with inspections in China. So for example, our back office speaks native English. So you don't have any broken English communications or emails. You speak with our back office in native English. And we actually put our back office in the Philippines, which really funny. A lot of people feel that in China, the labor rate is a few dollars an hour. For high paid English bilingual staff, it's actually really expensive. So our Philippines back office is about 6 times cheaper to run than a Chinese back office. So we're able to give you a lot better service for a lot lower price. And we also have a lot of internal systems. We're bringing tech to inspections. So we're building out a whole system for inspections. We're looking into bringing body camera footage on inspectors. And our entire booking process is also radically different. So when you're booking inspections with us, we'll give you recommendations on your products, on product tests. We'll continually adapt your products. And one of the biggest things is we actually base our inspection quotes on estimated real times for the inspection, instead of giving inspectors really crazy quotas, like 3 8-hour inspections to do within the same day. We don't do that. We make sure the inspector has enough time to properly do your inspection to your standards. So that way you can make sure that, your inspection results are not forged, they're not fraudulent, and, the inspector properly went through the process, and along with videos to show you how they did the process. So we have a lot of cool stuff. You can read more about us at movley.com, and you can connect with me personally on LinkedIn or sometimes Facebook, depending on how active I am. So, definitely reach out, and we'd love to kind of talk more and work with you guys.
Great. Thank you so much for coming here today, and we wish good luck in your business.
Thank you. And you too.
I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're looking for product inspection service, check the links below to Movley company. And now I would like to invite you to watch another video with Sajag from Movley, where he talks about what tests you need to do for your product, and also what elements as an Amazon seller you can influence in the inspection service.